followed by physical disability at 33%, drug or alcohol addiction at 30%, and 5% each for HIV/AIDS and developmentally disabled. And they could identify more than one of these conditions in their response. So this year, another thing that is new is that we went deeper and we identified 5 subpopulations that we are using for planning purposes, and we extracted the survey results for each of those populations. So the 5 subpopulations are veterans and their families. Secondly, it's chronically homeless non-veterans. And in order to fall into that category, they have to be disabled, they have to have been homeless for a year or longer, or have had 4 episodes of homelessness in the past 3 years. Unaccompanied youth, aged 16 to 24. Families not in any of the above categories, meaning that if a family is related to a veteran, they're going to fall in the veteran category and they're going to be eligible for veteran programs. And then we have individuals not in any of the above categories. So the same thing here. If they're chronically homeless, they're going to be in that category. If they're veterans, they're going to be in that one. So how did we get to these subpopulations? Each of these groups has distinct characteristics and needs. In the case of the veterans and their families, there are veterans programs that only they are eligible for. And different ones require different responses and interventions. And by looking at these subpopulations, we can see trends in each one of them more clearly and determine where the needs and the greatest gaps are. So we can better plan to meet the needs of our homeless population. So the next chart shows the percentage changes. And I need to open up a chart here that corresponds to this. If I can find it. Maybe I can. So, but in summary, what took place here is that the increase in the veterans and in the youth offset decreases in all the other populations. So there you have in the blue, that's 2013, and in the red is 2014, and then across the bottom you have the different populations. I thought I had those percentages, but do you have them? Let's see. Well, I can't get them off of a bigger chart. I just thought I had it broken out. I can get it from here. This is fine. Right. Okay. So let's see. Looking at the chronic non-vets, that population was 506 in 2013. It dropped to 569 to 337. So we had a 1/3 reduction in the chronic non-veteran population. For the veterans and their families, which is the next one, that population increased from 170 in 2013 to 250 this year, an increase of 80, which represented a 47% increase in that population. Then looking at non-chronic, non-vet families, we had a drop of 97 from 493 to 396, and that represented a 20% decline. Youth, the count last year was so small, it was only 4, that it doesn't really make any sense to even look at percentage increases. And we're probably still undercounting this population. So next time, some new things will be tried to reach them. And then finally, the non-chronic, non-vet adults. And this group also declined by 24%, from 1,467 in 2013 to 1,117 in 2014. So that gives you the overall trend in each of those groups, and then we're going to look at each one by itself. In terms of the percentage distribution of these groups, this is a very interesting chart in that it shows that 50% of the population that we're dealing with consists of non-chronic, non-veteran individuals. And you're going to keep seeing that population being, a big part of the total population as we look at different parts of it. Then we have, I think I do have this one, maybe not. The chronic non-vet is in the red with 15%, unaccompanied youth at 6.38%, and the last one in the blue is non-chronic, non-veteran families with 18%. And next we're going to look at the unsheltered population. So these are the people that are literally living on the streets. They're not in emergency shelter, they're not in transitional. So this is essentially people living on the street. And we have a total of 1,098 counted. Again, the largest population are the non-chronic, non-veteran individuals who had 44%, and that represented 481 people. The next largest group was the chronic non-vet group, which represented 21% of our street population. 226 were counted. And that was followed by the non-chronic, non-veteran families, and they represented 14% of the population, and the population number was 149. And then we had vets and their families, which represented 12%, 134 were counted. And unaccompanied youth represented 10% at 108. Okay, so looking at each one a little bit more specifically, as we said before, the chronically homeless non-veteran population declined by a third. And they represent 15% of the total homeless population. In comparison, in 2013, they represented 22% of the population. And we did count 337 chronically homeless non-vets, and a large percentage, over 2/3, were unsheltered, 226. And this group tends to have resistance to congregate shelters. So I think this is one of the reasons why this percentage is that high. Many of you participated in the 500 Homes Forward campaign, which is part of a national effort to get the chronically homeless housed. The response that is indicated for this group is Housing First, permanent supportive housing. And they are the most vulnerable and the most likely to die on the street. They're also heavy users of expensive emergency services like the emergency room, the jails. So, you're going the wrong way. Okay. So veterans and their families comprise 11% of the total population. And this group, as we said earlier, increased by 47%. since last year. According to the VA, veterans are expected to increase in number through 2015 as America's military involvement overseas is reduced. And we have two main programs specifically geared to veterans. The Supportive Services for Veterans and Their Families is a prevention and rapid rehousing program. And it's currently, the applications have gone in, but no announcement has been made about the renewals, but we do expect it to be renewed. And the other big program is the VASH program, where Tampa Housing Authority administers the rental subsidy voucher, and the VA provides the support services. So families, people living in families, we're defining families as 2 or more people. They don't have to have children, just 2 or more people, who are neither chronic nor affiliated with the veterans. And they represent 18%. The group declined by 20%. In 2013, we had 493 homeless people residing in 201 families and representing 22% of the homeless population. So there's been a decrease in number and a decrease in the percentage of the total population. This is that big group that is neither chronic nor veteran. So there's resources targeted for chronically homeless, there's resources targeted for veterans. There's not much out there for this population. It did decline by 24% from 1,467 to 1,117. It represents 50% of the overall population. Compared to 2013, they represented 64% at that time. So another population that's declined both in numbers and in the percent of the homeless. Unaccompanied youth is defined as being aged from 16 to 24. We have a youth work group that is currently working on gathering information and formulating a community plan for this group. And as we said before, it increased from 4 to 143. It is difficult to identify. They blend in very easily, so we do expect that there are much higher numbers in the community. And finally, we took a look at how we compared with other communities in 2013. So this is actually the 2013 data, and it takes about a year for all this data to come together, including the U.S. Census population estimates. But over on the left here, you have Hillsborough County, and you can see that the bar as a whole represents our homeless count population. So you can see that Pinellas, Orlando, Jacksonville, not Wisconsin, they're the exception, but Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and the U.S. all have higher levels of homelessness in relation to population. So this is homeless per 1,000 population. Looking for one of my charts here. Can you go back to the chart for a minute? The other thing that's interesting is that the blue part represents the sheltered, and the red part represents the unsheltered within that count. So looking at Fort Lauderdale, which has almost the same level of homelessness as we do, but if you notice, their system is about a third bigger than ours. So as a result of that, they have more people sheltered than we do, and they have fewer people on the street. So we hope that puts to rest once and for all the notion that Hillsborough County has this exceptionally large number of homeless people, because comparing apples to apples and relative to population, that is simply not the case. So, in conclusion, this data provides the baseline that will be used for future planning. I think it shows that if we want to reduce our street homeless population, we have to develop more programs for adults who are non-chronic and non-veteran. There's not a whole lot of sympathy for that group, but we have to deal with it, and employment is likely to be a key to their ability to leave homelessness. The next one we've already discussed. And finally, I just want to say that over the past 6 months, a number of very significant changes have been put into motion, not the least of which are the new facilities that are being funded by Hillsborough County to provide emergency and bridge housing, 2 of which are already operating. I believe one opens today. So we'll hear more about that during our meeting, but Metropolitan Ministries, I believe, is opening today. What are you doing here, Christine? So those changes that many of you have been working on, coordinated intake and assessment, the coordinated outreach, all these things that have started, we won't see the full impact reflected in these numbers until 2016. That's just, a lot of the new things that have had funding directed at them are not yet up and running. And once they are up and running, we need to give them a year to operate and to see how things work out. So I think in 2016 is when you can look for, significant changes. So that's our presentation. Are there any questions?
When can the public have access to the
Immediately after this, we have data here.
And the PowerPoint will be sent out later this afternoon.
Any other questions? Yes, Ray.
When you're speaking about veterans, are you referring to those who are eligible for VA services because they have served X amount of time in honorable discharge, or are they people who self-identify saying, I serve a veteran, but they don't need eligibility under the Veterans Administration or health care or others?
During the count, we take their word for it. So it's, did you serve in the military? Yes, no. Chronically homeless are people who have have a disability, and secondly, they have been homeless for a continuous period over a year, or they have experienced 4 episodes of homelessness during the past 3 years, and it can include families as well as individuals. Other questions? Did we overwhelm you with facts and data? Well, I'm sure that once you have time to review the data in more detail, feel free to email me or Lisa with any questions that you might have, and we'll do our best to answer them.